I am the milking mommy that has come to demolish. Speaking about the milking mommy discourse, the Paradox Institute wrote a transphobic article trying to debunk my research doc on trans lactation. With me lactating, I also compiled essentially the body of medical scientific research on lactation in trans women. This person claims to have been debunking my research doc. I did a little bit of research into this person. They seem to be some kind of like Nazi furry. Here's their Twitter account. It's crazy because like whenever you see someone who's a furry, they're either like the most based radical leftist anarchist, or they're just like a Nazi. Just like doing a couple of searches, found them talking about, no, I'm not denying Nazi crimes, like pretty quickly on their Twitter account. Like, I guess this is just the people that write these kind of crazy articles. They've gotten to some kind of Twitter debate over like whether or not trans people were targeted by the Nazis. But it makes perfect sense that they were, because Magnus Hirschfeld, whose clinic was burned and raided by the Nazis, like the images of the Nazi book burnings, that's showing them burning the research on trans people conducted by Magnus Hirschfeld. Like, of course they hated trans people. They burnt the available research we have on trans people. Also, this tweet is crazy because they're saying they're not denying Nazi crimes. Also, they're American and have the right to free speech. So are you saying that you're not denying Nazi crimes, or that you have the right to free speech to deny Nazi crimes? Because, like, those are completely separate arguments that are crazy. Like, I can deny Nazi crimes if I want to is a wild argument. And then their entire argument that trans individuals were not targeted for being trans in Nazi Germany, they say that it's because they only had the word transvestite, not the word like transgender or transsexual. But that's literally just not true. Actually, the term transsexual was actually coined by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, who ran the clinic that researched trans people. The term was first used in 1923. They had a term to refer to transsexual people, not just like cross-dressers, and Dr. Hirschfeld's research was actually establishing that there was differences between trans people who medically transition and the medical transition procedures that we can do. Things like cross-sex hormones, even early forms of gender-affirming surgery were conducted by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld in the 1920s. It was fascinating stuff. And more things talking about Magnus Hirschfeld being a Jewish gay doctor. So this Nazi furry decided to try to debunk me, and they wrote for the Paradox Institute, which, for those that aren't aware, the Paradox Institute is one of these, like, trans-exclusionary radical pseudo-biology websites. There's a group of these, like, people that try to, like, pretend to be very academic, but they almost, like, never have good credentials, or, like, often had their credentials revoked or are no longer practicing academics because they were just bad at science or were just unable to get their research published. The likes of this would include the Paradox Institute. There's also, like, Colin Wright, Dr. Deborah So. There's like a group of these weird pseudobiologists. But let's talk about this article written by Talia, our favorite furry Nazi. Is a trans woman nursing really about feeding the infant, or is it about feeding the dysphoria? In this detailed piece, Talia analyzes the literature on artificially induced male breastfeeding to see if it is safe and healthy for the infant. Here's another debunking adventure into the world of safety and considerations in male breastfeeding. This adventure was spurred on by the ongoing claims made by a trans woman on Twitter. That's me, by the way. She doesn't name drop me in this. She just subtweeted about me in an entire article, who claims that trans women are just as capable, if not better, than females when it comes to breastfeeding infants. Today, we will analyze their prepared and cited argument to... I'm sorry, was that a singular they? Did she just use a singular they right there to refer to me? Transphobes will go out of their way to not gender trans people as the gender they transition to by using the singular they, and cite an argument to determine if trans women breastfeeding is truly better than females breastfeeding. Also, like, I feel like the goalposts that we're setting right off the bat are just absolutely crazy, because it doesn't need to be, like, better than cis female lactation. It just needs to be sufficient, even as a supplement. Like, for example, in cis women who can only produce a little bit of breast milk, it's recommended that they feed their child formula to make sure they're fed, but supplement with the breast milk they can. And so the same should be true about trans women lactating, where as long as they can supplement formula feedings and the child stays fed, then yeah, that's exactly what you want. So we're going to cover 3 categories. Milk production volume, which is a silly category when you recognize that you can supplement with formula. Like, who cares how much you can produce as long as you can produce some and the child gets fed with formula? Adequate nutrition, good category. Medication effects, also good category. The argument begins with 2 studies with the comment that 2 peer-reviewed case studies of induced lactation in trans women. Each case involved moderate quantities of milk production, and the children's health was observed to be developmentally appropriate. It's really funny because she's like referencing my research doc directly, but like she doesn't link to it anywhere. And so I think that for somebody that's like not aware of my research doc, this article would be like a little bit hard to parse. All right, what about milk production volume? Case study 1. First title article is a single case study. Yes, that's what a case study means. It should be noted that single case studies are not adequate for efficacy population-wide. Single case studies are supposed to be proof of concept, like the idea that yes, a trans woman can lactate. Now we can like have doctors start to establish protocols, do more research, etc. And there have been more studies done than just case studies. But yes, the first studies exploring like a new branch of science are often case studies. And we do have a couple of case studies on trans women lactating. This article has issues, but documents that a trans woman was able to lactate by using a combination of stimulation and medication. Let's get into those issues. The first problem is that this trans woman was able to produce 8 ounces of milk a day. For reference, a newborn will drink between 4 to 6 ounces a day for the first 2 days of life. By day 3, infant will drink up to twice that much. By 2 weeks of age, they will drink between 2 to 3 ounces per feeding, with 8 to 12 feedings a day. The 6 ounces each day will nowhere near cut it, which is why by the time the infant was 6 weeks old, they were supplementing feeding with formula and eventually switching to formula being the primary source of nutrition. How is that a problem? That's not a problem. That's just saying that they gave their child adequate nutrition by using breast milk plus formula. But on top of that, the primary medication used to reduce prolactin levels is called domperidone, which was determined not to be safe for infants or children because of a lack of efficacy. That is just not true. Domperidone is no longer approved by the FDA because it was linked to heart problems in elderly women that took it intravenously. There have been no like abnormal increases in heart problems in young, healthy women or in infants who are breastfed by someone who's taking domperidone. So she's just lying and misrepresenting the data there. This is also done after reports of cardiotoxicity at pediatric doses. That is also not true. That just didn't happen. This report highlights a significant risk for populations with reduced liver function and electrolyte instability, of which infants fall under both categories. It was not concerned about infants. We actually have like the actual lactation journal of the National Library of Medicine for domperidone right here, and they say that no adverse events were noted in mothers or children that were taking the medicine for lactation. So she's just lying about the state of research. Because like the lactation journal for a given drug will literally cover all of the peer-reviewed studies that like the National Library of Medicine has talking about a drug. It's a lot of stuff here. You can see that there's over like 66 citations. And it says that there were no adverse events noted in mothers or children. We're just lying there. In addition, the FDA recommended against using domperidone for breastfeeding in 2004 because the medication is excreted in breast milk, causing unknown risk in infants. That's not why they recommended against using the medicine. They recommended against using the medicine because it was linked to heart risks in elderly people who were already predisposed to heart risks. So we're once again just lying about why the FDA issued a warning. So the 2 problems were the infant was fed formula, which is not a problem, and that I'm lying about what the FDA said, which is not a problem with the study. The second case study mirrors what was seen in the first. Lactation was induced by altering progesterone and estrogen levels by using domperidone to induce lactation. Even given more lenient dosing, the trans woman was only able to produce 3 to 5 ounces per day. Again, this is nowhere near what would be nutritionally required. But once again, she supplemented with formula, so it's literally a non-issue. Also, by the way, I'm producing more milk than the women in any of the studies I've seen so far. I've been able to produce up to 10 ounces of milk a day, and my supply is still increasing, especially with the portion of the protocol that I'm at right now, where I've now done the part where I increase my hormones to simulate pregnancy, and then decrease my hormones to simulate postpartum. That's the stage that I'm in right now, where you produce the most milk. And I am at 10 ounces and counting. I am the milking mommy that has come to demolish concerns about, like, volume. And also, another update on this front is that I'm going to get my breast milk tested. I've ordered one of these laboratory test kits for breast milk to analyze the nutritional contents of my breast milk, and I'm gonna do that. So that test is going to be coming pretty soon. And yeah, we are in business. Okay, let's talk about adequate nutrition. The goal behind the next set of citations is to demonstrate that a trans woman can produce adequate nutrition to an infant via breastfeeding. Study 1. The first study cited involves measuring the nutrients from a 47-year-old trans woman who wishes to support breastfeeding of their child in addition to the mother's breastfeeding. Similar to previous cases, this trans woman is only able to produce approximately 5 ounces per day. The expressed milk was analyzed for 4 nutrients: protein, lactose, fat, and calories. These values were then compared to average values of breastfeeding women between 2 and 3 months after birth. The result of the analysis for that milk produced was within a reasonable range of the standard numbers, with one exception: fat. That's not true. Within the study, the woman's fat content of her breast milk was within the normal range. It was just at the higher end of the normal range. And by the way, high fat content in breast milk is a sign of good, high quality breast milk. You can look at any breastfeeding guide. High fat content in breast milk is highly desirable. The average fat for breastfeeding women was 3.4 grams a deciliter. The amounts collected from the trans women samples range from 4.1 to 6.2 grams per deciliter. Solid fat content milk. Really good stuff. Keep up the good work. The amount of fat in milk the infant receives is important for the growth and development of the infant. However, too much fat can also result in health problems early in life, including obesity and diabetes. That goes against literally everything I've heard about fat content in milk. So let's check their citation for that. They're saying too much fat results in obesity and diabetes. Let's go ahead and search obesity. Let's see. This says that high protein content in formula is associated with obesity. That's not breast milk. Studies have showed that breast milk mitigates infant programming of late metabolic diseases, particularly protecting against obesity and type 2 diabetes. Breast milk protects against obesity and type 2 diabetes. This says that protein in formula is linked to obesity. So she's just lying about the citation. She's literally just lying about the citation. Is there any other times it says diabetes? This is the only time diabetes appears in the article. Like, she's literally just lying about her citation. The citation says nothing of the sort, that too much fat in breast milk is linked to diabetes. It says that protein in formula is linked to diabetes. We're just lying. You can literally just make up a scientific claim, put a citation that says nothing of the sort, and the Paradox Institute's going to accept it. Yeah, it's literally the opposite of the truth. It should be noted that the mother in this case also breastfed the infant in question, so despite the poor volume, the infant was never malnourished. They did the base lesbian tactic of having both mothers breastfeed the child. Very poggers, very good, highly recommended. In addition, the study states its own limitations, that the nutrient measurements may be over or underrepresented, as the collection was over an estimated 24-hour period. Yes, all studies have limitations. You can do like measurements of nutrition over a longer period of time. We know that breast milk varies in nutrients based off of your diet, based off of time of day. So collecting things over a 24-hour sample will give you a good kind of like day average. And if that's a good representative average of your kind of baseline nutrition levels, then that should be pretty sufficient. But if you have very fluctuating nutrition, then you might want to do some further testing. But it seemed that wasn't really the case in this study. Perhaps the most concerning part of the study, oh no, let's get into it, is that it included a statement from the trans woman about how affirming the act of breastfeeding was, and the emotional and bonding benefits for the trans woman. While bonding to the infant is important, such bonds can be achieved through skin-to-skin contact and does not require breastfeeding. What kind of argument is this? She's saying that bonding is important, but you can bond with kids in other ways, so don't bond in this way. That would be like me saying hugging your kid can be a great way to bond with the kid through physical touch, but you can also bond with your kid through other ways, so don't hug your kid. What? That's completely ridiculous. Why would I not hug my kid just because there's other ways I can bond with my kid? It's literally just saying, don't bond with your kid this way if you're trans. Like, it's literally just transphobia. Okay, study 2. The second study of the section was a comparison of nutritional values from the gestating female parent and a non-gestating female parent. Lactation was induced in the non-gestating parent via stimulation and hormone changes. Nutrition between the two groups was found to be identical. This shouldn't be surprising, as both groups are female. This is actually crazy because she doesn't explain why the study was cited, and also she's lying about the study. So the reason that I cited the study is because I said that the trans woman's breast milk nutritions were better than reference levels in every category because it's consistent with the literature on the nutritional contents of breast milk from induced lactation in cis women. And what this article found is that the woman who induced lactation tended to have better nutritional contents than the women who breastfed naturally. It seems that inducing lactation often results in higher nutrient-dense breast milk. And so they actually didn't find identical nutrition between the groups. They found higher nutritional density in the induced lactation group. Like, she's just once again lying, and it doesn't even make sense why she included the study without the greater context. The last study that was offered compared the nutritional composition of breast secretions of a male with galactorrhea. So this last study is actually really cool. It was like a really old study where there was a man who produced breast milk. Men sometimes produce breast milk. It's a condition called galactorrhea. They analyzed this dude's breast milk for nutritional contents, and it was found to be within the ranges of normal lactating women, like 40 plus years ago. Fascinating stuff. The study was not specific about the particular disorder causing the 27-year-old male to lactate, but indicated enlarged pituitary fossa. Most common cause of such enlargement is a tumor. I'm guessing he didn't have a tumor, because it seemed like everything was healthy with the guy in the case study. Oh no, there are quite a few issues with the study. Let's hear about them. The first is that it was published in 1981. That's not a problem. If a case study's results are sound, and it was done 40 years ago, that doesn't detract from the validity of the science. A 40-plus-year-old study isn't the best science we have available. If that's not the case, then cite a better study. People did this in the 1980s. If you have better science, then cite that. She doesn't. That's why she's just saying it's not the best without providing any kind of citation, because she's just lying. The second issue is that the amounts of secretions was not documented, only the macronutrients, so there's no way to tell if such secretion would be sufficient to feed an infant. Once again, you can just supplement with formula. That's a non-issue. The third issue is that the milk was being compared against included the averages of nutrition from 52 women from various timings from prepartum to up to 12 months postpartum. How is that a problem? The nutritional value of milk varies depending on the age and needs of the infant. Yes. But if we're within normal ranges, it shouldn't be a problem, especially if you can supplement with formula and adjust according to nutritional needs. With such a large and varied sample size, the standard deviation of the nutritional values were so wide that most any nutritional value could be included in the normal range. I'm guessing that's just not true. For instance, nutritional potassium levels from breastfeeding mothers was an average of 13.4 mm plus or minus 20.3 mm. So the male secretions could have had 0 potassium and still have been within the standard deviation of the breastfeeding mothers. So this statement is telling me that something is wrong here. Because if we're doing 13.4 plus or minus 20, that would imply that -7 would be a valid value. So I'm guessing she's misreading something. And also the argument is that it could have had 0 potassium. Did it have 0 potassium? Or are we just saying is the argument literally, what if it had lower nutritional contents than it actually did? Because that's not an argument. I could say the same thing about cis women lactating. Yeah, but what if cis women lactating was just not nutritional? Okay, but it's not. Yeah, but what if it was? That's what her argument is here. Okay, let's open the study to see what the heck is going on here. Okay, here is the study. Ooh, we've got a table. Perfect. So, okay, here is the man, and then here is the women. Oh, here's the problem. Okay, she's just reading the notation wrong. This says mean plus or minus standard deviation. So these aren't the ranges that were observed, and standard deviations can often be skewed in one direction. So for example, I'm guessing what the case was on this number is that it tended to be that the average was 13.4, and the variation tended to skew higher rather than lower. And so here's the potassium contents of his milk, 15, 16, and 21. All were above average. All of the measurements of the potassium in his milk were above average. She had to lie by saying, well, what if it was 0 when it was literally above average? What a liar who also just doesn't know how to read studies and doesn't understand standard deviation. This is hilariously bad. From all these studies, we can say that the nutritional value of breast milk was only ever proven in females. What? It was literally proven in this guy. It was literally proven in the trans woman. It was literally proven in both of those cases. The studies involving males are consistent in low milk supply and inconsistent when it comes to nutritional value. What? The nutritional value was shown to consistently be at reference levels or above, and the supply was always shown to be moderate to low, which is not an issue if you supplement with formula. What about the effects of the drugs used to induce lactation? The next few citations include information packets on the medication domperidone. Something to note is that this pamphlet states the maximum dose to be used to increase lactation is 10 milligrams 3 times a day. In the second study linked in this list, the trans woman had to increase the dose of domperidone to 30 milligrams 3 times a day. That is 3 times the maximum dose for this medication. Ooh, that is a subtle deception. Notice that the statement is that the maximum dose, it's not actually the maximum dose, but the maximum recommended dose to increase lactation is 10 milligrams 3 times a day. So the first use of domperidone as a galactagogue, as a medicine to increase lactation, was done in cis women who were already lactating. And essentially what these studies found is that after about 30 milligrams of domperidone in women who are already lactating, you get diminishing returns. And so it really just doesn't make sense for women who are already lactating to take more than about 30 milligrams to increase lactation further. However, when scientists were later inventing the Newman-Goldfarb protocol to induce lactation in women who are not naturally lactating, what they found is that sometimes you can go higher, up to 80, even 90 milligrams of domperidone, to establish a milk supply in the first place. And in some cases, those doses are appropriate. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. And if you're inducing lactation versus increasing lactation, the recommended dosage is going to be different. So that's how she's being subtly deceptive here. None of these studies in the pamphlet included male participants. Actually, that's under her definition of male, including trans women, the National Library of Medicine books actually literally do include trans people, lactation by adoptive and transgender women, literally in the pamphlet, in the National Library of Medicine article on breastfeeding, it mentions that it was used by transgender women. She once again is not reading or is lying about the studies. The next cited page is another information page on domperidone, which continues to state that side effects for the infant are not well known or tested. There have been no adverse events noted, but the vast majority of mothers receive little to no benefit from the use of the medication to increase lactation. That's talking about above 30 milligram doses. This means that the risk is not worth the benefit for breastfeeding mothers. That really depends on a case-by-case basis. There are some mothers that really do depend on domperidone to increase lactation. There are other mothers who induce lactation using domperidone. It's really, really disingenuous and deceptive to make such a sweeping statement from such a case-by-case kind of information. Next, we cover 3 medications that trans women use and their safety for infants who are breastfeeding. First is spironolactone, testosterone blocker. In the citation provided, it states that the use of spironolactone is acceptable. That should be full stop. We're all good there. Spironolactone is acceptable, and shows that the levels seen in applicable case studies. Of these case studies, there was only one trans woman. Oh wait, so here she acknowledges that trans women were mentioned. Yet up above she said that trans women were not mentioned in the packets. Okay, so she's contradicting herself. And the dose was at 100 milligrams per day in 2 doses. However, many trans women may take a maximum of 400 milligrams per day. I've never heard of a trans woman taking that much, but if spironolactone is acceptable for breastfeeding, increasing the dose by that much shouldn't be an issue. Is the argument that, like, if you're taking too much Spiro, maybe be cautious and talk to a doctor? Because, like, first off, I'm not even on Spiro, and I'm talking to a doctor. So, like, I've got the double win there. Additionally, the article states that there has been no published information about the use of spironolactone in infants via breastfeeding. What? That's completely false. Where's the one that I provided? Here's the one I provided. No information on infants that were effects in breastfed infants. There's an entire section titled Effects in Breastfed Infants. Yet she said no published information about the use of spironolactone in infants via breastfeeding. There's an entire section dedicated to exactly what you're saying doesn't exist. How can she get away with this? Like, if you check any of her citations, it debunks her instantly. In other words, it's a big unknown given the potential varying doses. It's not. They literally have it right here. They literally have it right here. The next medication on the list is estradiol. The link citation states that the serum concentrations of maternal estradiol and serum infant estradiols were not connected. However, in many cases that involved the use of estradiol resulted in inability to provide sufficient nutrition to the infant without supplemental nutrition sources. Okay, so just use formula, not a problem. This is because in females who breastfeed, estrogen levels are naturally lowered while prolactin levels rise. That is true. When a mother stops breastfeeding, her prolactin levels decrease and her estrogen levels rise, allowing her to start her menstrual cycle again. Also true. So although it may be a safe hormone to have while breastfeeding, it is naturally antagonistic to the hormonal process that allows for lactation to occur. Yes, and that's why if you're a trans woman inducing lactation, your doctor will lower your estrogen levels when you want to start increasing your supply. And that's what I'm doing right now, is lowering my estrogen levels to be able to increase supply. Third medication on the list is progesterone. The cited page gives an overview of progesterone and the impact on nursing women and infants, which is minimal. Boom, we're all good. However, the dose given to these women via birth control medications or devices producing a dose of approximately 10 milligrams per day. Starting dose of progesterone recommended for trans women can be as high as 100 to 200 milligrams per day. I'm pretty sure they used doses that were higher than just 10 milligrams a day in the lactation journal. Higher doses than 10 milligrams are literally mentioned in this article. Oh, here's even one that did 200 milligrams twice a day, which was the highest dose reference for trans women. So they literally did evaluate the safety and efficacy at that dose. All right, let's get to the conclusion. Talia is a Nazi who lies about science because she's transphobic. Yeah, I think that's the conclusion we need. It is safe to say that there is no sufficient evidence to prove trans women can safely breastfeed an infant, except for all available evidence which does show that. Like, she just showed that the evidence was there, conceded that it was there, and then said it's not it doesn't prove it. Like, she literally made so many concessions in this article and then lied where she didn't make concessions. So I've produced a lot more volume than any one of these studies so far. So perhaps we just need to do some more research, figure out what kind of protocols can be better at increasing supply. And also, you can always supplement with formula. Feeding your kid formula and supplementing with breast milk is amazing. Formula is great. A fed kid is what you want. If you can supplement with breast milk, that's even better. Do that if you can. And that's what's recommended for cis women too. So to like try to attack trans women for supplementing with breast milk over the alternative of not giving any breast milk is just going against like the scientific advice. Even further, it's concerning that it was of great importance that breastfeeding was affirming for the trans woman, but breastfeeding is affirming for cis women too. It's a very potent way that mothers bond with their children. It's a very motherly affirming experience for cis women. Why can't trans women have that too? Breastfeeding is about providing nutrition and immunity benefits to an infant, and also bonding with an infant, which is something that she noted in her own article, is that it has benefits for bonding with the infant. It should be concerning to everyone that affirmation is addressed at all. Not at all, because bonding with the infant is a really big part of breastfeeding too. Given the risk of the infant, the ethical question must be asked: is a trans woman nursing really about feeding the infant, or is it about feeding the dysphoria? That doesn't even make any sense, because like, wouldn't it be alleviating dysphoria if it's affirming? So that doesn't feed into dysphoria. What a dog shit article. Nazi crime denier, science denier, liar about studies. Fat L. Fat freaking L.